The massive granite boulder that Jakob Müller spent 3 years hollowing into a home maintained 55 degrees inside, while the blizzard of 1871 raged at -40 outside, killing dozens who had mocked his insane rock dwelling. His carved chambers in solid stone, dismissed as the ravings of a grief-stricken madman, became the only shelter that survived when wooden cabins shattered like matchsticks in the storm that redefined Colorado mountain survival. Let us know your location below, and hit subscribe for more incredible stories of frontier innovation. The rescue party from Denver struggled through 20-foot snowdrifts on March 3, 1871, searching for survivors of the worst blizzard in Colorado Territory history. Captain Michael O'Brien led his exhausted men toward Granite Creek, where 17 homesteads had stood before the storm. They found only splintered wood and frozen bodies until they noticed smoke rising from what appeared to be solid rock. Approaching closer, they discovered a wooden door set directly into a house-sized granite boulder, warm air flowing from its depths. Inside, they found Jakob Müller calmly tending a small fire, surrounded by carved stone chambers that maintained comfortable warmth despite the Arctic conditions outside. 8 refugees sat at a stone table, eating fresh bread while the storm that had killed their neighbors howled impotently against millions of tons of solid granite. The interior revealed masterful stonework, smooth walls carved directly from the boulder's heart, shelves and furniture sculpted from the living rock, ventilation channels that brought fresh air without cold. The impossibility struck O'Brien speechless. While wooden cabins throughout the region had exploded from temperature extremes and crushing snow, this hollowed boulder had provided absolute protection. The granite mass that everyone considered an obstacle to development had become the ultimate shelter. Children played in carved alcoves while outside temperatures would kill in minutes. The thermometer on the wall read 55 degrees, maintained by rock mass that moderated any external extreme. Müller explained how 3 years of patient carving had created 4 connected chambers within the 60-foot boulder. Each room served specific purposes: living space, sleeping quarters, storage, and workshop. Natural fissures had been incorporated as ventilation shafts. The rock's thermal mass absorbed heat slowly and released it gradually, creating stability impossible in wooden structures. Most remarkably, the entire dwelling had cost nothing but labor, using no imported materials. The refugees told harrowing stories. The Brennan family had fled when their roof collapsed under snow weight. The widow Martinez escaped as temperature contraction tore her cabin walls apart. Each had struggled through the blizzard to the boulder they'd previously mocked, finding salvation in stone they'd called Müller's madness. The contrast with their destroyed homes was absolute. While wood failed catastrophically, granite endured unchanged. O'Brien's report would transform Colorado construction philosophy. He wrote, "The newspapers that had ridiculed now praised visionary architecture. Engineers arrived to study how one man with hand tools had created what they couldn't design with modern technology. Understanding required returning to 1868, when tragedy drove Jakob Müller to attempt what everyone deemed impossible, carving a home from solid granite using techniques that would revolutionize mountain dwelling and save countless lives in future storms." The spring morning of May 14, 1868, began with Jakob Müller preparing breakfast for his family in their cabin below Granite Peak. His wife Anna hummed while dressing their 3 children, twins Marie and Peter, age 5, and baby Emma, just walking. Their homestead occupied a meadow considered ideal by frontier standards: water access, southern exposure, and sheltered by the mountain's bulk. The massive granite boulder, 200 yards upslope, seemed a harmless if inconvenient landscape feature. The rock slide began with a crack like thunder. Centuries of freeze-thaw cycles had finally split the cliff face above, releasing thousands of tons of granite. Jakob looked up to see death descending, not snow like avalanches, but solid rock bouncing and shattering, gaining momentum with each impact. He screamed Anna's name while running toward the cabin, but physics made rescue impossible. The slide hit with earthquake force, the cabin vanishing beneath grinding stone. Silence followed, more terrible than the roar. Jakob dug frantically with his hands, joined soon by neighbors drawn by the catastrophic sound. But unlike snow that might preserve air pockets, the rockfall created absolute destruction. They found the cabin's remnants crushed flat beneath tons of granite debris. Anna and the children had died instantly, their bodies recovered only after 3 days of careful excavation using mining equipment. The meadow that had seemed perfect became a cemetery of shattered stone. The giant boulder that dominated the surviving landscape became Jakob's obsession. It had stood unmoved while smaller rocks destroyed everything. Throughout the slide, it had remained fixed, splitting the flow around itself like an island in a river of stone. If his family had been inside that boulder rather than below it, they would have survived. This thought consumed him during weeks of catatonic grief, eventually crystallizing into determined purpose. Jakob spent months studying the boulder with fevered intensity. 60 feet long, 40 feet wide, and 30 feet tall, it weighed approximately 4,000 tons. The granite showed no fractures or instability. It had rested here since glaciers retreated 10,000 years ago. He tested the rock hardness, examined natural fissures, and calculated volumes with obsessive precision. Where others saw an immovable obstacle, Jakob saw the ultimate protection against any disaster nature could unleash. The decision to carve into solid rock seemed insane to neighbors already worried about Jakob's mental state. Rock excavation was mine work, not home construction. The labor required would be enormous, the result uncertain. But Jakob had witnessed wooden structures' fatal vulnerability. He'd seen how the boulder endured forces that pulverized everything else. If stone could destroy, stone could also protect. His family lay buried beneath granite's crushing weight. He would find salvation within granite's protective mass. By September 1868, Jakob had acquired the tools that would define his next 3 years: specialized chisels from mining suppliers, sledgehammers of various weights, and the new dynamite for careful blasting. His madness had found method. October 1868 found Jakob Müller studying his chosen boulder with the intensity of a surgeon preparing for operation. The massive granite monolith wasn't uniform, but contained variations that would determine where and how to carve. He spent weeks simply observing how morning sun warmed different faces, where rain collected or ran off, which sections rang clear when struck versus dull thuds indicating internal flaws. This patient analysis would guide 3 years of labor. The granite itself told a geological story. Formed deep underground hundreds of millions of years ago, it had cooled slowly, creating large crystalline structures that gave superior strength. Glacial transport had rounded its edges while preserving the solid core. Most critically, the boulder showed no significant fracturing. Unlike the cliff that had shattered above his homestead, this stone possessed monolithic integrity that could shelter rather than threaten. Jakob discovered natural advantages to exploit. A vertical fissure on the south face provided an entrance point requiring minimal excavation. Interior examination revealed the grain running horizontally, ideal for creating level floors and ceilings. Small natural cavities could be enlarged into rooms rather than starting from solid rock. The boulder's position allowed drainage away from planned living spaces. Every feature suggested the rock wanted to become a dwelling. Technical challenges demanded innovative solutions. Traditional mining used explosives liberally, but Jakob needed controlled removal that wouldn't shatter his shelter. He developed a technique using small dynamite charges in precisely drilled holes, fracturing rock in manageable sections. The debris itself became useful, larger pieces for construction projects, smaller for drainage fill. Nothing would be wasted in transforming destroyer into protector. The planning phase revealed Jakob's engineering intelligence despite lacking formal education. He sketched layouts maximizing the boulder's natural properties. Living spaces would occupy the warmest south-facing sections. Storage areas could utilize cooler northern zones. The highest point would house a chimney, using convection for smoke removal. Each decision balanced human needs with geological reality, working with rather than against the stone's nature. Local reaction ranged from pity to alarm. Reverend Thompson preached about Quote 3 and the dangers of isolation. The territorial surveyor warned about property rights. Could someone claim the interior of a boulder? Dr. Harrison worried about Jakob's mental health, seeing obsession rather than innovation. But Jacob continued his methodical preparation, accumulating tools and knowledge while neighbors whispered about madness. The first strike of chisel on granite rang across the valley on November 1, 1868. Jacob had chosen his entry point based on exhaustive analysis, where natural weakness made excavation easier without compromising structural integrity. That initial chip of granite began a transformation that would challenge every assumption about frontier dwelling. The stone that had taken his family would become sanctuary, but only through labor that would test human endurance against geological patience. By month's end, Jacob had removed barely 1 cubic yard of granite, but the entrance had begun. The mountain had accepted his intention. The carving had commenced. The specialized equipment Jacob Müller assembled through winter 1868 represented the convergence of mining technology and stoneworking artistry. His tool collection grew beyond basic hammers and chisels to include innovations most frontier settlers never imagined. From Denver came a pneumatic drill, hand-operated but capable of boring precise holes for controlled blasting. From California arrived tempered steel chisels designed for granite work on government buildings. Each tool served specific purposes in the monumental task ahead. The financial cost staggered observers. Jacob sold his remaining livestock, his wagon, and most possessions to fund tool purchases. The pneumatic drill alone cost $200, enough to build a substantial frame house. Specialized drill bits required constant replacement, as granite dulled them rapidly. Dynamite, carefully rationed for precise work, added ongoing expense. Neighbors calculated he'd spent enough to relocate and start fresh anywhere, yet he invested everything in carving stone. Jakob's technique evolved through painful trial and error. Initial attempts at large-scale removal created dangerous fractures. He learned to read stress patterns in the rock, understanding how force applied at one point transmitted throughout the mass. Small charges, precisely placed, could separate manageable blocks without compromising integrity. He developed a rhythm, drill patterns of holes, place minimal explosive, clear debris, assess results, adjust approach. Progress measured in inches taught patience granite demanded. The physical toll showed dramatically. Jakob's hands, once skilled at carpentry, became gnarled from gripping vibrating tools. His hearing diminished from constant hammer strikes, echoing in confined spaces. Rock dust scarred his lungs despite improvised masks. Weight fell from his frame as labor consumed more calories than frontier diet provided. Yet obsession drove him forward. Each cubic foot removed meant protection that wood could never provide. Innovation, born from necessity, improved efficiency. Jacob created templates for drilling patterns, ensuring consistent spacing. He developed water cooling systems for drill bits, extending their life. A sledge system transported debris using the boulder's natural slope. Most cleverly, he learned to exploit temperature changes. Water poured into drilled holes would freeze overnight, expanding to crack granite along desired lines. Nature assisted when properly directed. Winter's challenges multiplied difficulties. Tools became painful to grip in freezing temperatures. Dynamite required careful warming to function properly. Shortened days limited working hours. Snow blocked access, requiring constant clearing. Yet Jacob persisted, driven by visions of completed chambers. He worked by lamplight when darkness fell, the rhythmic hammering echoing across frozen valleys like a mechanical heartbeat. By spring 1869, the entrance cavity reached 6 feet deep and 4 feet wide. The pace seemed glacial. At this rate, completion would require decades. But Jakob had learned the stone's personality, understanding its strengths and weaknesses. His tools had become extensions of his will, each precisely suited to specific tasks. The battle against geological time had established its rhythm. The mountain could not be hurried, only persistently convinced. Progress came not through force, but through relentless, informed pressure. June 1869 marked a breakthrough as Jakob Müller completed his first livable chamber within the granite boulder. After 7 months of relentless labor, he'd carved a room 8 feet square with 6-foot ceilings, modest dimensions representing monumental achievement. The space wasn't merely hollowed, but carefully shaped with smooth walls, level floor, and architectural details that transformed raw cavity into human habitation. This first success validated his methods while revealing the project's true scope. The chamber's creation had required removing approximately 20 tons of granite, each pound extracted through meticulous effort. Jakob had learned to follow natural grain patterns, making removal easier while ensuring structural stability. The ceiling curved slightly, distributing weight around the opening rather than creating stress points. He'd incorporated a natural fissure as a ventilation shaft, enlarging it just enough for airflow without weakening the surrounding rock. Finishing techniques distinguished dwelling from cave. Using progressively finer chisels, Jakob smoothed walls to almost polished perfection. The floor received special attention, leveled precisely and textured to prevent slipping. He carved shelving directly into walls, eliminating need for furniture. A sleeping alcove, following a natural depression, provided psychological comfort within stone embrace. These details required patience exceeding excavation itself, but transformed mere hole into architectural space. Temperature monitoring through summer revealed remarkable stability. While outside temperatures swung 40 degrees daily, the chamber varied by only 3 degrees. The massive thermal mass absorbed heat slowly during hot days, releasing it gradually through cool nights. This natural climate control surpassed any wooden structure's capability. Jakob slept comfortably in his stone room, while neighbors battled temperature extremes that made rest difficult. The granite provided what no amount of construction could achieve. Waterproofing proved unexpectedly simple. The solid granite needed no sealing, naturally shedding the minimal moisture that penetrated. Jakob enhanced drainage by sloping the floor imperceptibly toward the entrance. A lip carved at the doorway prevented any water intrusion. Unlike wooden structures battling constant moisture infiltration, the stone chamber remained perfectly dry. This inherent advantage would prove crucial for long-term habitability and storage. Psychological impact surprised even Jakob. Sleeping within solid rock provided security no wooden walls could match. The absolute silence, broken only by his breathing, allowed deep rest impossible in creaking cabins. The permanence felt profound. This chamber would endure centuries unchanged. Yet the space didn't feel tomb-like. Careful proportions and smooth surfaces created comfort rather than claustrophobia. The stone that had seemed cold and forbidding became protective and welcoming. By autumn, Jakob had established permanent residence in his carved chamber, abandoning the temporary shelter he'd occupied during construction. Neighbors visiting the completed room expressed amazement at its comfort and craftsmanship. The widow Henderson, initially horrified by Jakob's plan, admitted feeling safer within stone walls than her own cabin. Word spread of the remarkable achievement. One man had carved living space from solid granite using hand tools. The first chamber's success motivated expansion. Jakob had proven the concept. Now came the challenge of creating a complete dwelling. Winter 1869 brought systematic expansion, as Jacob Miller, emboldened by his first chamber success, began carving additional rooms within the granite boulder. His vision encompassed 4 interconnected spaces: living area, sleeping chamber, kitchen, and storage, all flowing naturally within the stone's mass. The work progressed faster now, his techniques refined through experience, his understanding of the granite's personality complete. Each hammer blow served deliberate purpose in the growing architectural symphony. The connecting passages proved most challenging. Unlike chambers that could follow natural weaknesses, tunnels required forcing through solid stone regardless of grain. Jacob developed a corkscrew pattern that removed material efficiently while maintaining smooth walls. These passages weren't mere connections, but architectural features, their curves preventing sight lines between rooms while facilitating airflow. The design created privacy and thermal separation while maintaining the monolithic strength that wooden doorways would have compromised. The kitchen chamber showcased Jacob's evolving artistry. He carved a cooking hearth directly into the north wall, utilizing a natural vertical fissure as chimney. The design drew inspiration from medieval castle kitchens with smoke channels that heated surrounding rock mass before exhausting outside. Counter surfaces emerged from the stone itself, polished smooth and pitched for drainage. Storage niches honeycombed the walls at convenient heights. The space merged function with geological form seamlessly. Water management received particular attention. Jacob discovered a seasonal seep in what became the kitchen area. Rather than viewing this as a problem, he carved collection basins that captured the pure, filtered water. Overflow channels directed excess outside through carefully graded passages. This gravity-fed system provided water without hauling from the creek, a convenience no surface cabin could match. The granite that seemed so solid revealed hidden flows when properly understood. Lighting solutions demonstrated remarkable innovation. Jacob carved light wells that followed natural fissures toward the boulder's exterior. By widening these strategically and installing mirrors at key points, he brought reflected daylight deep into the stone. Oil lamps supplemented this, but their placement in carved niches with polished surrounds maximized illumination. The chambers glowed with warm light despite being encased in millions of tons of rock. The psychological transformation of space within stone continued to amaze visitors. What should have felt oppressive instead conveyed security and permanence. The curved passages created mystery and discovery rather than confinement. Each chamber possessed distinct character while maintaining harmonious flow. Children visiting with their parents played happily in spaces that adults initially approached with trepidation. The stone welcomed rather than threatened, embraced rather than imprisoned. By spring 1870, Jacob had completed his 4-chamber complex within the boulder. Total excavation approached 100 tons of granite removed grain by grain. The living space rivaled any frontier home for comfort while exceeding all for security and climate control. Furniture carved from stone eliminated most wooden needs. The boulder that had seemed an obstacle to development had become a complete dwelling. Yet Jacob's ambitions grew. If granite could provide basic shelter, perhaps it could offer even more. Summer 1870 revealed the full sophistication of Jacob Miller's design as his boulder home faced its first series of severe tests. A flash flood in June sent water cascading down Granite Creek Valley, sweeping away 2 cabins and drowning livestock. The torrent split around Jacob's boulder like a ship's prow. The carved drainage channels he'd integrated, handling runoff perfectly. While neighbors lost everything to water's force, his stone chambers remained absolutely dry, proving natural architecture's superiority over human impositions. The ventilation system demonstrated remarkable self-regulation during July's heat wave. Cool air entered through lower passages, warmed gradually while moving through living spaces, then exited via the chimney shaft. This natural convection created constant fresh airflow without any mechanical assistance. The temperature differential between stone mass and outside air drove circulation that increased with heat. The hotter the day, the stronger the cooling breeze. Surface dwellings became unbearable ovens, while Jacob's chambers maintained comfortable conditions. Fire resistance provided absolute security in a frontier where wooden structures regularly burned. August brought forest fires within a mile of the boulder, smoke choking the valley for days. Neighbors prepared to evacuate, knowing ember showers could ignite their homes instantly. Jacob simply closed his wooden door, the only flammable component, and waited inside stone that couldn't burn. The fire passed around the boulder like floodwater, leaving scorch marks on the exterior, while interior remained unaffected. Structural integrity surpassed any imaginable threat. When September's earthquake shook the region, collapsing chimneys and cracking foundations throughout the valley, Jacob felt only slight vibration within his granite fortress. The monolithic stone moved as a single unit, impossible to damage through ground movement that destroyed rigid wooden structures. His carved chambers showed not even hairline cracks after tremors that required major repairs elsewhere. The boulder had endured millennia of earthquakes. Human habitation didn't change its fundamental stability. Security features went beyond natural protection. Jacob had carved his entrance with defense in mind, a narrow passage requiring single-file entry, with carved handholds allowing the occupant to brace while resisting intrusion. Murder holes carved above the entrance allowed defending the approach without exposure. Storage chambers could be sealed from within, preserving supplies even if main areas were compromised. The design borrowed from medieval castles but executed in monolithic stone that needed no mortar or joints to exploit. Social dynamics shifted as Jacob's stone dwelling proved itself repeatedly. Former mockers arrived seeking advice on their own construction. The banker who'd refused Jacob credit now offered loans for expansion. The minister who'd preached against burrowing like animals requested a tour, later admitting the spiritual peace within stone silence. Success bred respect, though some jealousy emerged among those whose traditional buildings seemed suddenly vulnerable. By winter's approach, Jacob had created more than shelter. He'd demonstrated architectural philosophy that worked with, rather than against, natural forces. The granite boulder provided everything human habitation required while eliminating traditional structures' vulnerabilities. The architecture of safety wasn't imposed but discovered within stone's existing properties. November 1870 brought the first major snowstorm to test Jacob Müller's granite dwelling, though test hardly described the stone's indifference to weather that panicked valley residents. While neighbors frantically split wood and patched drafts, Jacob observed the storm's approach with calm curiosity. His preparations consisted of ensuring adequate lamp oil and food supplies. The boulder itself needed nothing. The contrast with wooden cabins' constant maintenance highlighted fundamental differences between fighting and embracing natural shelter. The storm struck with unusual violence, temperatures plummeting 30 degrees in 2 hours. Wind speeds exceeded 60 miles per hour, driving snow horizontally. Inside the boulder, Jacob experienced something remarkable: absolute silence. The millions of tons of granite absorbed sound completely. No howling wind, no creaking timbers, no snow pelting walls. The silence was so profound he could hear his own heartbeat. This acoustic isolation created peace impossible in wooden structures that transmitted every external sound. Temperature stability amazed even Jacob. His thermometer showed 53 degrees throughout the storm, varying less than 2 degrees despite external temperatures reaching -20. The granite mass that had accumulated summer heat released it slowly, maintaining comfort without any fuel consumption. He cooked meals on his carved hearth, the chimney drawing perfectly, regardless of wind direction. The stone chambers felt like summer evening, while death howled inches away outside. Psychological benefits emerged unexpectedly. The storm's violence, completely unfelt within Stone Embrace, eliminated anxiety that plagued surface dwellers. Jakob slept deeply while neighbors maintained exhausting vigils, feeding fires and watching for roof collapse. The absolute security allowed normal activities, reading, crafting, cooking, while the world outside turned hostile. The stone didn't fight the storm, but ignored it, rendering its fury irrelevant to daily life within. Neighbors sought refuge as the storm persisted. Thomas Garrett arrived first, his cabin's roof threatening collapse under snow load. The Henderson family followed, their windward wall beginning to separate. By the third day, 12 people occupied Jakob's chambers, discovering space adequate for all. The boulder that seemed a single man's hermitage proved capable of sheltering a community. Shared adversity within stone walls created bonds that wooden isolation had prevented. The storm's aftermath revealed dramatic contrasts. Several cabins had suffered major damage, lost roofs, collapsed walls, frozen pipes. The boulder showed only snow accumulated in natural hollows, already beginning to melt in sunshine. No repairs needed, no systems to restore, no damage to assess. The stone had endured this storm as it had endured 10,000 previous winters, unchanged and unchangeable. Human habitation within hadn't altered its fundamental imperviousness. Documentation of the storm's effects spread through mining newspapers. Engineers calculated that maintaining similar comfort in wooden structures would have required burning 2 cords of wood, roughly 4,000 pounds of fuel. Jakob had burned perhaps 20 pounds for cooking. The economic advantage was undeniable, but the psychological benefit proved greater. Absolute security within stone had provided peace during nature's violence. The silence of stone spoke louder than any storm. Spring 1871 brought unexpected social transformation, as Jakob Müller's proven success attracted others seeking similar security. The Isolated Grief Project had evolved into a demonstration that challenged frontier building assumptions. Families who'd sheltered during winter storms couldn't forget the absolute comfort within stone walls. Several approached Jakob about creating their own boulder homes, though suitable monoliths proved rare. This scarcity led to a revolutionary proposal: communal chambers within the mountain itself. The granite cliff face above Jakob's boulder offered unlimited carving potential. Unlike his balanced monolith, the cliff was living bedrock, extending deep into the mountain's heart. Jakob surveyed possibilities with experienced eyes, identifying stable zones suitable for expansion. His proposal was ambitious: multiple family chambers connected by common passages, sharing ventilation and water systems. The engineering challenges multiplied, but so did potential benefits. A community within stone could achieve efficiencies impossible for isolated dwellings. Initial participants included 3 families who'd survived the winter storm in Jakob's boulder. The Garrett family, impressed by stone's stability, committed immediately. The Hendersons, tired of annual cabin repairs, saw long-term economy. The widow Martinez, seeking security for her children, appreciated the communal safety. Each family would carve their own chambers while contributing to shared infrastructure. Jakob would supervise, ensuring structural integrity and architectural harmony throughout. The communal project required new techniques. Coordinating multiple work faces prevented interference while maximizing efficiency. Debris removal became systematized, with carved stone sorted for various uses: building material, road fill, drainage aggregate. Water discovered during excavation was channeled into a central system rather than individual supplies. Ventilation shafts were planned to serve multiple chambers through natural convection. The project resembled mining engineering more than home construction. Social dynamics evolved remarkably within shared stone walls. Traditional frontier isolation gave way to necessary cooperation. Families working side by side developed bonds stronger than scattered homesteads allowed. Children played safely in connecting passages, while parents labored. Evening meals became communal events in the first completed common room. Skills were shared. Martinez taught traditional crafts, Henderson provided engineering knowledge, Garrett organized work schedules. The stone community fostered human connection. By autumn, the cliff face showed 3 new entrances leading to family chambers in various completion stages. The architecture maintained Jacob's principles, following natural features, incorporating discovered advantages, working with rather than against stone's properties. Each family added personal touches while maintaining overall harmony. The Martinez chamber featured carved religious symbols. The Henderson space included elaborate shelving for books. The Garrett rooms emphasized workshop areas. Diversity within unity emerged naturally. The psychological impact extended beyond participants. Valley residents watched a mountain transform into dwelling space, challenging every assumption about proper homes. Some remained skeptical, clinging to wooden traditions. Others began examining cliffs and large rocks with new eyes. The banker approved loans for stone carving tools. The general store stocked specialized equipment. What had seemed one man's madness was becoming a movement. The community carved from granite represented more than shelter. It demonstrated humanity's ability to adapt and thrive within nature's provisions. The first true test of the cliff community came in September 1871, when forest fires swept through Granite Creek Valley with unprecedented fury. Dry conditions and high winds created a firestorm that consumed everything combustible in its path. Wooden homesteads, barns, and fences became fuel for advancing flames. The traditional response, creating fire breaks and wetting structures, proved futile against ember showers that ignited new fires miles ahead of the main blaze. Jacob Müller and the cliff dwellers faced a different reality. Their granite homes couldn't burn, but smoke and heat posed threats. Jacob organized responses with military efficiency. All wooden doors were removed and stored deep within chambers. Wet blankets hung across entrances would filter smoke while allowing air passage. Water reserves filled every carved basin. Most critically, ventilation shafts were partially blocked to prevent ember intrusion while maintaining airflow through temperature differential. The fire arrived at night, transforming the valley into hell's landscape. Trees exploded from superheated sap. The Hendersons' abandoned wooden cabin, left as storage, vanished in minutes. Flames reached the cliff face, finding nothing to consume on bare rock. The fire split around the granite barrier like water around stone, seeking fuel that didn't exist. Inside their chambers, families felt temperature rise perhaps 10 degrees, uncomfortable but not dangerous. The aftermath revealed devastation throughout the valley except at the cliff. Where wooden structures had stood, only ash and twisted metal remained. 7 families lost everything to flames. 3 deaths occurred when fire overtook evacuation attempts. But the cliff community emerged unscathed, their stone chambers showing only external soot, easily washed away. The mountain that seemed forbidding had provided absolute protection when traditional shelter became death traps. Relief efforts organized from the cliff chambers, now the only intact structures for miles. Stored food supplies, protected in cool stone rooms, fed survivors who'd lost everything. The common room became emergency shelter for burned-out families. Water from the granite's springs, uncontaminated by ash, provided clean drinking supplies when wells elsewhere were fouled. The stone community became the valley's lifeline during recovery, demonstrating benefits beyond individual protection. The fire's passage catalyzed massive interest in stone construction. Insurance companies, calculating total losses from wooden structures, began offering reduced rates for granite dwellings. The territorial government commissioned a study on fire-resistant construction featuring Jacob's techniques. Mining engineers arrived to document methods applicable to other regions. What necessity had driven became officially recognized as superior architecture for fire-prone areas. The psychological impact transformed valley culture permanently. Families who'd invested everything in wooden homes, only to watch them vanish in minutes, understood impermanence viscerally. The granite chambers that survived unchanged represented security beyond monetary value. Children who'd sheltered during the fire would never forget stone's protection. The mountain had shielded its adopted residents absolutely. This wasn't mere survival, but thriving despite nature's extremes. The cliff community had faced trial by fire and emerged stronger. October 1871 brought unexpected abundance as the cliff-dwelling community discovered agricultural possibilities within and around their granite homes. The fire that destroyed valley farms had spared the cliff's unique microclimate, where reflected heat and wind protection created growing conditions superior to open fields. Jacob Müller, always observing, noticed wild plants thriving in crevices where soil accumulated. This observation sparked innovations that would transform subsistence into surplus. Terrace gardens carved into the cliff face below dwelling entrances utilized gravity-fed irrigation from spring seepage. The granite acted as massive heat storage, moderating temperature swings that killed plants elsewhere. Vegetables planted against warm stone matured weeks earlier and produced weeks later than valley gardens. The reflected sunlight intensity allowed crops previously impossible at elevation. Tomatoes, peppers, and even grapes thrived in the manufactured Mediterranean microclimate. Inside the chambers, controlled environment agriculture exceeded outside productivity. Jacob developed growing systems using reflected lamplight and consistent temperatures. Mushrooms flourished on logs in dark corners. Sprouted vegetables grew year-round in carved planters near light sources. Herbs hanging from ceiling hooks dried perfectly in the controlled atmosphere. The stone chambers became production facilities as well as homes, generating food when surface agriculture struggled. Food preservation in stone chambers revolutionized frontier nutrition. The consistent cool temperatures in deeper rooms created perfect root cellars without construction. Smoked meats aged in designated chambers developed flavors impossible in variable conditions. Fermented foods, sauerkraut, pickles, cheeses, achieved consistency that made them marketable products rather than survival rations. The cliff community began trading preserved goods for supplies, creating economic sustainability beyond subsistence. Water management innovations multiplied agricultural potential. Carved channels directed every drop of seepage into useful purposes. Settling pools clarified water for drinking. Overflow irrigated terraces. Drainage from washing became garden water. The closed-loop system wasted nothing while producing abundance. Traditional farms hauled water laboriously. The cliff community had gravity-delivered supplies integrated into living spaces. The efficiency allowed agriculture intensity impossible with conventional infrastructure. Community cooperation amplified individual efforts. The Garrett family's engineering skills created efficient irrigation. Martinez's traditional knowledge identified optimal planting times. Henderson's record-keeping tracked what worked best where. Children tended gardens as play, learning skills while contributing. Harvest became celebration rather than exhausting labor. Surplus supported neighbors still recovering from fire losses, building goodwill that translated into mutual support. By November, the cliff community had stored enough food for comfortable winter survival, plus trading surplus. Root vegetables filled cool chambers. Dried goods hung from every ceiling. Preserved meats and fermented products lined carved shelves. The abundance mocked conventional wisdom about mountain agriculture limitations. Visitors expressed amazement at variety and quantity produced from seemingly barren rock. The stone had proven fertile when properly cultivated. The psychological shift from survival to prosperity transformed community dynamics. Instead of anxious winter preparation, families planned improvements and expansions. Trade negotiations replaced subsistence worries. Children grew up expecting abundance rather than scarcity. The granite that seemed sterile had enabled agricultural success beyond wooden farmsteads' achievements. The stone harvest demonstrated that working with natural advantages surpassed forcing traditional methods onto challenging environments. The blizzard that struck Granite Creek Valley on December 15, 1871, exceeded any storm in territorial memory. Weather observers in Denver recorded impossible statistics before their instruments failed: wind speeds over 90 miles per hour, temperatures dropping to -43 degrees, snow falling at 8 inches per hour. The storm arrived with minimal warning, trapping residents wherever they stood when visibility dropped to zero within minutes. This would be the ultimate test of stone versus wood construction. Traditional cabins faced immediate catastrophe. The Williamson Place, built to withstand normal storms, saw its roof peel away like paper within the first hour. The Peterson family watched their walls rack and twist as wind found every weakness. Windows exploded inward from pressure differentials. Doors ripped from hinges became projectiles. Families huddled in corners as their shelters disintegrated around them, praying structures would last long enough for survival. Many prayers went unanswered. Inside the cliff dwellings, residents experienced the storm as distant thunder. The granite mass absorbed wind force without trembling. Snow accumulation meant nothing to entrances carved into vertical faces. Temperature remained stable as massive stone radiated stored heat. The ventilation systems, protected by baffles Jacob had insisted on, continued functioning despite exterior chaos. Families pursued normal activities, cooking, reading, crafts, while death raged outside their stone sanctuary. The storm's duration tested endurance beyond structure. 5 days of continuous blizzard conditions exhausted fuel supplies in wooden homes. Families burned furniture, then flooring, finally supporting beams in desperate attempts to maintain warmth. Food froze solid. Water sources became ice. Frostbite claimed fingers and toes despite every effort. The psychological toll of constant wind howling, structure creaking, death approaching, broke spirits before bodies. Several simply gave up, accepting frozen fate. The cliff community organized systematically for extended siege. Food supplies, preserved in stone chambers, remained accessible and unfrozen. Water flowed from protected springs. Fuel needs were minimal. Small cooking fires sufficed when stone provided warmth. The common room became activity center, where families gathered for meals, entertainment, and mutual support. Children attended lessons, adults pursued crafts, evening storytelling maintained morale. The stone walls that blocked storm also contained human warmth. When the storm finally exhausted itself, rescue parties found devastation beyond comprehension. Of 43 traditional structures in the valley, 38 had suffered catastrophic failure. 27 people had frozen to death. Survivors showed severe frostbite, malnutrition, and psychological trauma. The cliff community emerged to help dig out neighbors, their own health perfect, supplies intact, spirits unbroken. The contrast was absolute. Stone had provided total protection, while wood had failed completely. Documentation of the storm's differential impact transformed territorial building codes. Engineers calculated that traditional structures faced forces beyond any design parameters. The cliff dwellings hadn't resisted these forces. They'd ignored them. No amount of reinforcement could make wood perform like granite. The territory's deadliest storm had provided clearest proof. In extreme conditions, integration with natural stone meant survival, while traditional construction meant death. The aftermath of December's catastrophic blizzard transformed the cliff dwelling from curiosity to critical refuge as survivors throughout Granite Creek Valley sought shelter. 23 families had lost homes completely, with many suffering injuries from structural collapses. Jakob Müller and the established cliff residents faced an unprecedented situation. Their stone chambers designed for individual families now needed to accommodate an entire community of refugees. The response would define mountain society for generations. Emergency expansion began immediately. While carved chambers couldn't be created quickly, natural caves connected to the dwelling system were rapidly modified for habitability. Jakob supervised crews working in shifts, enlarging passages and smoothing floors. The granite that required months to carve properly could be made barely habitable in days when necessity drove effort. Each family contributed labor according to ability, with even children hauling debris. Desperation created efficiency, impossible under normal circumstances. Organization emerged naturally from crisis. Maria Martinez coordinated food distribution, her experience with large family meals scaling to feed dozens. Thomas Garrett engineered temporary heating in new spaces using reflected warmth from established chambers. Sarah Henderson established a medical station treating frostbite and exposure cases. The widow Peterson organized childcare, creating routine for traumatized youngsters. The stone community that had developed organically now functioned with institutional efficiency. The psychological dynamics fascinated observers. Families who had maintained fierce independence in scattered wooden cabins now lived in closer quarters than most had ever experienced. Privacy vanished, but was replaced by security. Shared meals became normal rather than special occasions. Children formed bonds across family lines. Adults discovered skills in neighbors they'd barely known. The enforced intimacy within stone walls created social cohesion that isolated frontier life had prevented. Resource management showcased communal advantages. Individual families would have struggled with limited supplies, but pooled resources stretched remarkably. Preserved foods from autumn's stone harvest fed everyone adequately. The water system, designed for original residents, handled increased demand through careful scheduling. Fuel consumption remained minimal as body heat supplemented stone's warmth in crowded chambers. What seemed impossible, 70 people living in spaces built for 20, became manageable through cooperation. The extended refuge period through January and February created permanent changes. Families allocated temporary spaces began carving permanent chambers. Communal systems expanded, larger water storage, improved ventilation, expanded common areas. The emergency response evolved into planned community development. By spring thaw, the cliff face showed dozens of new openings as the mountain became home to most valley survivors. The disaster had catalyzed transformation from individual struggle to collective thriving. Government response validated the stone community's approach. Territorial aid focused on helping families establish permanent cliff dwellings rather than rebuilding vulnerable wooden structures. Engineers documented expansion techniques for other regions. The military studied communal organization for frontier fort planning. What began as emergency response became model for mountain settlement. The refuge in rock had proven that community within stone surpassed isolation in wood for both survival and society. April 1872 brought an official delegation of engineers, architects, and government officials to study what newspapers now called Muller's Mountain. The territorial governor himself led the group, recognizing that the cliff community's success during the devastating winter demanded serious analysis. Professor Edmund Hartley from the Denver Institute of Technology coordinated technical documentation while military engineers assessed defensive applications. Their findings would influence frontier construction policy throughout the Western Territories. The structural analysis amazed even experienced engineers. Jakob's intuitive understanding of force distribution matched calculations they derived through complex mathematics. His carved arches followed optimal curves for load-bearing. Chamber proportions maximized space while maintaining absolute stability. The integration of natural fissures for ventilation showed sophisticated understanding of convection dynamics. Most remarkably, the communal expansion had maintained these principles despite emergency conditions and multiple builders. Thermal documentation revealed the full advantage of granite mass construction. Sensors placed throughout the chambers showed temperature variation of less than 3 degrees annually. Surface structures experienced 90-degree ranges. The energy required to maintain similar comfort in wooden buildings would cost hundreds of dollars yearly in fuel. The cliff dwellings achieved superior conditions using zero external energy. Professor Hartley calculated that widespread adoption could eliminate most frontier heating costs. The water systems particularly impressed hydraulic engineers. Natural seepage, usually considered a problem in construction, had been transformed into reliable supply. The carved collection and distribution channels showed understanding of flow dynamics that formal engineering education rarely provided. Gravity-powered distribution eliminated pumping needs. Quality exceeded most municipal supplies due to natural filtration through hundreds of feet of granite. The integration demonstrated mastery of working with, rather than against, geological conditions. Social organization within the cliff community fascinated government officials. Traditional frontier governance struggled with isolated homesteads, but the concentrated stone community had developed efficient self-administration. Shared resources necessitated cooperative decision-making. Natural surveillance within connected passages eliminated most crime. Children received consistent education in the common rooms. Health outcomes exceeded any frontier settlement due to stable living conditions and mutual support. The physical architecture had created social architecture. The military engineers focused on defensive capabilities. The cliff dwellings were essentially impregnable fortresses requiring no construction. Narrow entrances prevented mass assault. Interior passages allowed defenders to move freely while attackers faced confusion. Stone walls provided absolute protection against projectiles. Food and water storage within ensured extended siege resistance. The engineers recommended similar installations for frontier forts, recognizing superiority over traditional wooden stockades. The comprehensive report published in June 1872 transformed perception of mountain construction. Formal engineering validated what necessity had created. Government funding became available for cliff-dwelling development. Building codes incorporated stone carving standards. Insurance companies recognized the reduced risks. Banks approved loans for granite construction. The delegation's work elevated Jakob Mueller from grieving innovator to recognized pioneer of mountain architecture. Universities requested his consultation. Engineering textbooks featured his techniques. The mountain that mockery had called madness became curriculum for progress. By summer 1872, the granite cliff above Granite Creek had transformed from natural barrier to thriving vertical community. Where bare rock once stood, dozens of carved entrances led to family chambers, workshops, and communal spaces. Gardens terraced down the cliff face created green cascades during growing season. Water channels sparkled in sunlight as they carried spring flow to irrigation systems. The mountain that had seemed hostile to human habitation now supported more families than the valley below ever had. The economic transformation matched the physical. Traditional frontier settlements struggled with subsistence, but the cliff community had developed diverse industries. The Garrett family's metal workshop, utilizing consistent temperatures for precision work, produced tools sought throughout the territory. Martinez's preserved foods, aged in perfect cave conditions, commanded premium prices in Denver markets. Henderson's furniture, carved from granite fragments, became status symbols for wealthy buyers. The stone that yielded no ore provided better prosperity than many mines. Educational advancement flourished in the stable environment. The Common Room School operated year-round, impossible in structures that froze or overheated. Children from the cliff community showed literacy rates exceeding territorial averages. Adults pursued evening education, sharing skills and knowledge. A library carved into quiet chambers preserved books in conditions impossible for wooden buildings. Visiting teachers marveled at students who studied comfortably while blizzards raged outside. The granite halls fostered learning that frontier hardship usually prevented. Cultural development followed educational growth. The acoustic properties of stone chambers created perfect performance venues. Musical evenings featured instruments and voices resonating beautifully in carved spaces. Theatrical productions used natural alcoves as stages. Art adorned smooth walls, paintings, carvings, and tapestries, transforming utilitarian spaces into galleries. The cliff community developed sophisticated culture while traditional settlements struggled for basic survival. Stone walls contained and amplified human creativity. Health statistics documented remarkable advantages. Dr. Morrison's annual report showed cliff-dwelling children grew taller and stronger than valley counterparts. Respiratory diseases, endemic in smoky wooden cabins, virtually disappeared in clean stone chambers. Elderly residents showed improved vitality in stable conditions. Birth survival rates exceeded territorial averages significantly. The correlation was undeniable. Living within granite meant living longer and better. The mountain provided health that medicine couldn't match. The social evolution continued advancing. Second-generation cliff dwellers, children who'd grown up within stone, showed different values than traditional frontier youth. Cooperation came naturally when walls were shared. Resource conservation was instinctive when systems were communal. Education was valued when schools never closed. These children would carry communal stone values into territorial development, transforming individualistic frontier culture. The mountain had shaped more than chambers. It had molded society. By year's end, applications for cliff spaces exceeded availability. The territorial government designated additional cliff sections for development. Engineering firms specialized in granite construction formed to meet demand. What Jacob Miller had begun in grief had become a movement. The mountain transformed from obstacle to opportunity, demonstrated humanity's capacity for adaptation. Stone that seemed forbidding had become welcoming through understanding and effort. The influence of Granite Creek's cliff community spread throughout the Rocky Mountain region by 1873 as engineers, architects, and social planners recognized applications beyond individual valleys. Railroad companies building through mountain passes studied granite construction for station facilities. Mining companies explored worker housing carved directly into claim sites. Military strategists envisioned frontier defense using natural fortifications. The principles developed through necessity in one valley promised transformation across the expanding frontier. The Denver and Rio Grande Railway became the first major adopter, commissioning cliff chambers at Marshall Pass. Traditional wooden stations required constant maintenance against extreme weather, burning substantial fuel for minimal warmth. The carved granite waiting rooms maintained comfortable temperatures year-round without heating. Passengers marveled at comfort found in solid rock. The success led to systematic development of cliff stations wherever suitable formations existed. Railroad travel became less arduous when stone refuges punctuated journeys. Urban applications surprised even advocates. Denver's expansion encountered granite outcroppings previously considered building obstacles. Inspired by Granite Creek, developers began incorporating rock faces into commercial structures. The Denver Mercantile Exchange built vaults directly into granite, achieving security impossible with constructed walls. Hotels featured cliff-carved dining rooms that became fashionable destinations. The principle of working with rather than against geological features transformed urban planning. Cities began valuing rock formations rather than blasting them away. Agricultural applications spread to regions with different geology. Sandstone cliffs in Utah proved suitable for food storage if properly sealed. Volcanic formations in Oregon offered similar thermal mass benefits. Limestone caves in Missouri needed modification, but provided excellent aging facilities. Each region's geology required adapted techniques, but core principles remained constant. Work with natural features, utilize thermal mass, integrate rather than impose. The movement became geological democracy, where any stable rock might become home. International interest developed through engineering publications. Swiss mountain communities recognized similarities to traditional construction, but found American innovations valuable. Particularly impressive were communal organization systems developed in Granite Creek. Chilean miners adapted techniques for Andean conditions. Australian settlers in harsh outback regions began cliff development. Japanese engineers studied earthquake resistance of monolithic construction. The frontier innovation influenced global architectural thinking. Social implications extended beyond construction techniques. Communities formed within stone developed different dynamics than scattered settlements. Closer physical proximity created stronger social bonds. Shared infrastructure necessitated cooperative governance. Children growing up in communal cliff settings showed different values than isolated homestead youth. Researchers began studying whether architecture could shape society. Could stone walls create different humans than wooden ones? The evidence suggested profound influences. By decade's end, Quote 7 existed throughout Western territories. What had begun with one man's grief had become regional transformation. Engineering schools taught granite construction as standard curriculum. Government policies encouraged cliff development in suitable locations. The movement that Mockery had dismissed proved more influential than any architectural trend. Mountains throughout the West showed carved entrances where communities thrived within stone. The valley innovation had grown beyond the valley, transforming how humanity inhabited challenging landscapes. By 1875, children who had sheltered in Jakob Müller's boulder during the Great Blizzard were becoming young adults, and their perspectives on home and community differed radically from their parents. This generation had grown up within granite walls, playing in carved passages, studying in stone chambers, understanding security as absolute rather than aspirational. As they reached adulthood, their choices would determine whether cliff dwelling remained emergency shelter or became preferred lifestyle for mountain communities. Emma Garrett, age 19, exemplified the new generation's attitudes. Raised in the cliff from age 12, she attended university in Denver, but returned to design improved chamber systems. Her engineering education combined with childhood experience produced innovations her father's generation hadn't imagined. She developed acoustic treatments that eliminated echo in large chambers. Her ventilation improvements increased airflow while maintaining temperature stability. Most significantly, she designed modular expansion systems, allowing families to grow their spaces systematically. Young men raised in the cliff showed different values than traditional frontier youth. Thomas Martinez Jr. organized cooperative work crews that helped new families establish chambers quickly. Rather than competing for resources, cliff-raised youth naturally shared tools and knowledge. They valued community contribution over individual achievement. When choosing careers, many selected fields benefiting communal life: engineering, medicine, education. The stone that had sheltered their childhood shaped their adult priorities. Romance within the cliff community created unique dynamics. Young couples couldn't maintain typical frontier isolation, instead courting under watchful community eyes. However, this supervision came with support. Established families helped new couples carve chambers before marriage. The tradition developed of gifting carved furniture and fixtures. Weddings became community celebrations in the common hall. Marriages beginning with secure shelter and community support showed lower failure rates than frontier average. Educational achievements of cliff-raised youth exceeded territorial norms dramatically. Constant access to school, stable study conditions, and community emphasis on learning created exceptional outcomes. The first Cliff children attending university uniformly excelled. Several won territorial scholarships. Their success attracted attention from educators studying environmental influences on learning. The correlation seemed clear. Children raised in secure, stable environments with strong community support achieved more than those facing frontier hardship alone. Professional choices reflected communal values. Sarah Henderson studied medicine, returning to establish a clinic within the Cliff. Robert Garrett became a teacher, expanding the Common Room School. These youth could have pursued opportunities elsewhere, but chose community benefit. Their skills, gained through outside education, enriched Cliff life immeasurably. The pattern repeated, youth leaving for education but returning with expertise. The brain drain plaguing frontier communities reversed in Cliff settlements. The generational transition brought fresh perspectives on expansion. While founders had carved from necessity, youth carved from vision. They planned recreational spaces, cultural venues, and specialized workshops. They understood stone dwelling not as last resort, but as first choice for mountain life. Their children would know no other home than granite chambers. The permanence that had saved their parents became foundation for their futures. Stone walls had created different people who would create different societies. Jacob Miller died peacefully on May 14, 1880, exactly 12 years after the rock slide that killed his family and drove him to seek shelter within stone. He passed in the original chamber he'd carved, surrounded by the thriving community his grief had created. His final words, recorded by Emma Garrett, were, "They buried him in a chamber he'd designated within the boulder, where granite that had been his salvation became his eternal rest." The Granite Creek Cliff community had grown to house over 300 residents by Muller's death. The carved chambers extended through multiple levels, connected by passages that created an underground city. Engineers studying the complex marveled at organic growth guided by consistent principles. Each addition respected natural geology while serving human needs. The architecture appeared to have grown rather than been built, achieving harmony between human habitation and geological formation that conventional construction never approached. Scientific analysis of the cliff dwelling's success revealed principles that would influence architecture for generations. The thermal mass benefits were quantified. Each ton of granite could store and moderate temperature equivalent to burning 50 pounds of coal. The ventilation systems achieved air exchange rates, matching mechanical systems, while using zero power. Structural stability exceeded any constructed building, with carved chambers showing no degradation after decades. The integration of water systems, food production, and living spaces created closed-loop sustainability before the term existed. The social experiment proved equally significant. Researchers documented that cliff communities showed lower crime rates, higher educational achievement, better health outcomes, and stronger economic cooperation than traditional settlements. The enforced proximity that seemed challenging had created bonds that isolated frontier life prevented. Children raised communally showed different values: cooperation over competition, conservation over consumption, community over individual. The architecture had shaped society in measurable ways. The influence spread globally as documentation reached international audiences. European mountain communities adopted American innovations. Urban planners incorporated geological integration into city expansion. Military architects studied defensive advantages of carved fortifications. Agricultural specialists recognized controlled environment benefits of stone chambers. The grief-driven innovation of one frontier settler influenced construction worldwide. Universities established programs in geological architecture. Governments funded cliff community development. The movement Jacob started in sorrow became global transformation. Modern preservation efforts maintain the original boulder chambers as a museum. Visitors can experience the 8x8 room where mountain architecture revolution began. The smooth walls Jakob carved by hand remain perfect after 150 years. The temperature stays constant at 55 degrees. School children touch granite surfaces where desperate innovation created enduring solution. They learn how tragedy can transform into legacy, how working with nature surpasses fighting it, how one person's obsession can shelter generations. The mountain that took Jakob Müller's family gave families to thousands. Stone that seemed cold and forbidding became warm and welcoming through understanding. Chambers carved in grief became foundations for joy. The impossible became inevitable as granite proved superior to wood for mountain dwelling. In valleys throughout the West, carved entrances mark where communities thrive within stone, testament to the vision born when one man chose to build into, rather than away from the rock that defined his loss and legacy.